There is a $1,750 difference between the most expensive and least expensive Sony 50mm lens. The most expensive being the Sony G Master 1.2 and the least expensive being the regular old 1.8 Nifty 50. Each of these lenses can produce sharp results, so where does that $1,750 difference in price come from? I've been using these lenses for the past few weeks now on my Sony a7S III and my Sony a7 IV, and I've been shooting mostly video, so let's jump into the differences and I'll tell you what I think at the end. First up is build quality. The build quality of the 1.2 G Master is the same premium lens experience you would expect from a G Master lens. Weather sealing, focus toggle switch, aperture ring that can be clicked or declicked, focus ring, and 2 customizable buttons. The 50mm 1.8 has no weather sealing and only has a focus ring. The build feels really cheap, but this is a lens that's $250 compared to a $2,000 G Master lens. The 1.8 weighs 0.4 pounds or 186 grams, while the G Master weighs 1.7 pounds or 778 grams. The G Master is 4.3 by 3.4 inches, while the 1.8 is much more compact, coming in at 2.7 by 2.25 inches. One of the biggest differences between these lenses is the autofocus. The autofocus on the $2,000 G Master is driven by 4 of Sony's XD linear motors. This allows for fast and incredibly accurate focus, even wide open at 1.2. I was using this paired with my a7S III and a7 IV and was able to rely on the camera and the G Master's autofocus to snap onto eyes or use touch tracking and it would just stay there, regardless of what the aperture was. Shooting wide open at f1.2 and having the camera perfectly focus on eyes makes for some really dreamlike footage. The autofocus on the Sony 50mm 1.8 is very difficult to use for dynamic video. If you're using it locked off on a tripod, you can get some pretty good results, assuming you won't be changing focus much. The autofocus for the 1.8 uses those older motors that hunt and search for focus. For stills photography, this isn't much of an issue, but for fast-moving photography or pretty much any video, this is going to be a problem. For video, the focus is unnatural and jarring, and it's one of the biggest reasons to look at another lens if you're using this primarily for video. But then again, if your subject isn't moving and you're comfortable with manual focus, this $250 lens will get the job done. When it comes to noise to focusing though, the 1.2 is silent, while the 1.8 is one of the loudest lenses I've ever heard. It's very distracting since it uses those older focus motors. It doesn't help that the 1.8 hunts for focus, and when it finds focus, it will sometimes go past it and back off just a little bit, just to ensure it actually found focus. With that in mind, if the subject is coming closer and farther away from you with the 1.8, the 1.8 may not even be able to find focus in video. When it comes to sharpness, both lenses are sharp in the center, wide open, and around the edges is a little bit blurrier. The 1.2 is sharp enough to use, getting sharper around the edges around f2. The 1.2 looks natural, but it has a warm color cast when you compare it to the 1.8. The 1.8 is sharp in the center, wide open, but it also has soft edges and heavy vignetting. The 1.8 wide open is sharp in the center, but very soft around the edges, with vignetting. The edges sharpen up around f2.8 and the vignetting is improved. By f4, the vignetting is gone on the 1.8. One of my biggest concerns for the G Master was sharpness at f1.2. Most lenses are soft when they're shot wide open, and some are almost unusable, but the sharpness of the G Master wide open is very usable, and coupled with the fast autofocus motors and modern Sony cameras, this is a great combination. When it comes to lens characteristics, the G Master has 11 blades and handles flaring really well, but still has some issues with chromatic aberration. The 50mm 1.8 has 7 blades and really struggles with flaring and chromatic aberration. It's still usable in my opinion, not as nice as the 1.2 G Master. This lens is just built better overall, but this isn't a huge surprise given the astounding price difference of these two lenses. For minimum focusing distance, both lenses struggle in my opinion. I shoot a lot of close-up images and I'm used to having very tight minimum focusing distances of at least under a foot away. However, the G Master focuses 15.5 inches away, while the 1.8 can focus 17.75 inches away. Both of these lenses seem like the minimum focusing distance is a little far away for my taste. I can't be too harsh because these aren't macro lenses and they're not billed as macro lenses, but I would like if both of these could have a little closer of a minimum focusing distance. When it comes to focus breathing, the 50mm 1.2 and the 1.8 do have focus breathing issues. However, the G Master is compatible with Sony's new focus breathing compensation feature, which crops in slightly on your images, but it removes all focus breathing. The 1.8 isn't compatible with that feature, however. Maybe this will change with a firmware update in the future, but right now, the only two cameras that can take advantage of this focus breathing compensation is the Sony a7 IV and the FX6. I hope more cameras are rolled out with this focus breathing compensation feature in the future, but that's outside of the scope of this video. When it comes to stabilization, both of these lenses have no optical steady shot, but you can use your camera's supported active stabilization. This isn't a big surprise as most primes don't have any kind of optical steady shot, but it's something to note. So the $1,750 question, what is the difference between these two lenses, and is it worth the extra money to go from one of the most affordable lenses Sony offers to one of the most expensive lenses Sony offers? The difference comes down to features. The build quality, the design, the sharpness wide open, especially the autofocus for video. The separation of 1.2 to 1.8 may not seem like much, but if you want to really isolate your subjects and nail focus at this focal length, it really doesn't get any better than this G Master. The minimum focusing distance for both of these lenses is a little far away in my taste, but like I said, they're not macro lenses, so I can't be too critical here. I wouldn't mind if both of these lenses were larger, however, and they had a closer minimum focusing distance and they included some kind of stabilization. But most cameras have stabilization baked in these days, so it's not as big of a deal. The difference in these lenses locked off on a tripod on a stationary subject might not look like $1,750. For beginners, it really doesn't get better than the 50mm 1.8. It's really attractive for about $250 brand new, and this fast aperture is a great way to learn and experiment with. The 50mm G Master offers a truly great experience though. The sharpness and autofocus, even at wide open, is fantastic with those 4 linear XD motors. I was used to my 20mm G lens that has 2 XD linear motors, and the 4 even wide open is what allows this lens to really lock onto subjects and stay there. All the features of the 50mm 1.2 coupled with modern Sony bodies make a really unique look coming out of this combination. If you have $2,000 to spend, I would definitely recommend the 50mm 1.2. If you're looking for some more budget lenses, check out this video of the Viltrox 24mm, and if you're looking to build your camera out, check out this build video. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.